Hi, I'm Rob Volpe, empathy activist and author of Tell Me More About That. And lately, I've been thinking a lot about how we overcome our differences. It feels harder than ever to talk across our divides, doesn't it? And we're all seeing it. I think it shows up in our news feeds, in our workplaces, and sometimes even around our dinner tables. But here's the thing. I don't think we've lost our capacity for empathy. I think we've just forgotten how to use it, especially in those moments when we need it most, when we're engaging with people with different viewpoints and perspectives. So today, on this episode of Reading Between the Lines, I want to take a look at what the data is actually telling us about our polarization and what it teaches us about how to connect with others. So let's start with what we know. Recently, the New York Times and Siena released a poll of registered voters. They fielded it in late September of 2025. And what they found was that two-thirds of registered voters, 64%, said that the political system in the United States is too divided in order for us to solve our problems. And that number has gone up from 42% in 2020. Only a third of people believe that we can still come together. And I just want to share, and you'll find in the chat below the link to, or in the comments, the notes, the chat. Down below, you will find a link, gift link to the actual article itself and the crosstabs, which is what I'm going to share with you right now. And as you can see here in the crosstabs, so this was the question. This is a little tutorial on how to read some of this. Do you think America's political system can still address the nation's problems, or is it too politically divided to solve its problems? So of all the US registered voters that they surveyed, and they had just over 1,000 answered this question, only a third said that yes, we can still address the nation's problems, and there's that 64%, too divided to solve its problems. And then you see how this breaks down. Gender, men and women were pretty evenly, had exactly the same numbers. And then you do see some variation based on age, also race and ethnicity. And as you scroll over to the right, it breaks it down even further, and you can start to look for where there's variations. In this question, there's not a huge amount of variation, except here maybe where you look at who they voted for and what their approval perception was of Trump, which are some of the earlier questions in the study. There are other places in the study where you do see more noticeable differences. Let me see if I can quickly find some of these. And if you're a data nerd or you're really into the politics of it, I was really excited to see that they were providing these crosstabs so that you could dig into this actual question. So one of the things that they found that I thought was really fascinating. So here's who did you vote for? Most important problem facing the nation today. So this is also part of this larger issue of polarization. The top thing, and I think vol meant they were taking open ends. People volunteered these responses and then they aggregated them. But the economy, number one, jobs, stock market, all the things. And then the polarization and the division in our country. And then you can see all these other indicators or issues that we're facing societally, whether it's crime or inflation or a specific political party, immigration, equality, racism, morality, religion, healthcare, gun policies. When it comes to what was the most important problem today, we're pretty divided over what is most important. And I'm going to talk about why that is in a moment. But here was something that was interesting. If you want to just start to see how the differences show up in the data in the way that people think and feel and behave. So there was the question, do you think Donald Trump's policies have helped you personally or hurt you personally or not made much of a difference? You can see the total for US registered voters. Most people are still saying not made much of a difference. But over a third are saying it's hurt them, and about a quarter have said it's helped them. But then notice the differences when it comes to gender breakdown. So men are evenly divided, help or hurt. Most are still saying the plurality is saying not made much of a difference either way. But with women, it's different. 45%, 44% of women feel like it's hurt them personally, where just over a third have said not made much of a difference, and less than a fifth have said that it's helped them. And then you can start to see how this plays out across age, across ethnicity. And as you go through this, you'll start to see where there's possibly tension points. So the way women are thinking about it differently from men, or between college educated, non-college educated. And that starts to give you a better sense of what's actually happening in our society. So I'm going to stop sharing now and get back to where we were talking. So two-thirds of people just in September 2025 have said America's too politically divided to solve its problems, and only one-third say we can come together. The good news in terms of the finger pointing, and this data is all in those crosstabs if you want to go find it, but only 10% of Democrats and 14% of Republicans said that they felt the other side, the other political party, were the enemies. So the good news is we don't really hate each other. We're just tired. We're tired of the outrage, of being told to pick a side, of having fear generated of the other side or of things that are different from us. And we're tired of watching our country pull further and further apart. Now, going back 3 years, Ignite 360 is navigating to a new normal study. We fielded similar questions in September of 2022, and we actually saw similar signals. The study was different because it wasn't with just registered voters, it was with general adult population in the United States. But even then, Americans were deeply worried about everyday life, rising food prices, gas, energy prices. Those are all the top concerns. But right after that, I mean, within 1 point difference, and we're talking these were all up. I think food prices was at 72%. Gas and energy were around 66, 65 at 64%. Rating a top concern was our inability to overcome differences. So that was one of the top concerns. And that came above all of those societal issues, climate change, crime, or healthcare. That to me was astounding. I think that's really extraordinary. And yet we've got two different studies, two different audiences, 3 years apart, but they're converging on that same fear that we're losing the ability to solve problems together. I want to share one other piece. This is the heat map that I had put together, thanks to my friends ChatGPT. And I'll put this in the printed version of the edition of Reading Between the Lines as well, so you can take a look. But notice in this heat map, see how the economic anxiety, food, gas, cost of living, it's up at a 5 in terms of level of concern. Political polarization and division stayed pretty high at a 4. This is from 2022, the Ignite 360 New Normal study, and then this recent 2025 New York Times Siena study. The state of democracy and corruption concern about that has definitely grown, but then social cohesion, trust in others has stayed the same. Public safety and crime has actually dropped. Again, this is not an apples to apples comparison, but it's interesting to see how these things are coming together. The point of this is we prioritize our own concerns that affect us most immediately, which is often going to be pocketbook issues. We worry about our pocketbooks. We also then worry about polarization. And I believe this isn't polarization of me in California with you over in Nebraska, but it's about on a local community level. It's about our ability to live together as well as about our livelihood. And then it expands out to what's happening with people that I may not know in Nebraska and how are they thinking and feeling. So, what's all this tell us? It says that Americans are redefining what safety means. It's not just about being financially stable, it's about feeling secure in that as well as feeling socially secure in our communities. When we can't trust the people around us to listen, to meet us halfway, to respect our humanity, that's a form of insecurity as well. And both of those things, the financial insecurity and not trusting the people around us, that strikes at that lower portion of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that pyramid. And so it makes sense that this is weighing on us and that everybody is starting to feel that frisson, that stress that's going on, that unsettled nature that is permeating our culture right now. And so here's where empathy comes in. And it's not empathy as a buzzword or a thing to avoid, but it's actually looking at empathy as an infrastructure and an ecosystem that we've been neglecting because you can't build bridges on outrage. Outrage just pulls things apart. We also can't build trust relying on and I'm going to spell it out, algorithms, because I don't want to get this thing buried. But we can't build trust on that. We can't rely on big tech to pull us together. We build empathy through and bridges through conversation by being curious, through that willingness to sit in discomfort for a minute longer than feels safe. Empathy, remember, is something that we do. It's not something that we automatically have. You have to work on it. You've got to work to build it with other people. It's a practice. And it starts with those 5 steps to empathy, which I always talk about and write about in the book. And in this particular case, when we're trying to build bridges, and in this moment, I'm going to highlight 3 of the 5 steps that I think are most important and give you a couple different activities, things you can do right now. So the first one is step 1, dismantling judgment. And that's about catching yourself in that moment when you want to just label in your brain somebody as one of those people to other them. And you want to notice it. And you want to question that and ask yourself, what what story might I not be seeing here? What's going on here? And what's coming up with me? And why am I having judgment about this other person? And how might I actually back off of that to clear that barrier out of the way? And of course, step 2 is asking good questions. And step 3, actively listening, being present and paying attention. But the other next step that I want to really pull your attention to is step 4, integrate into understanding. This is about making room in your mind for the idea that there can be more than one truth, that there are different ways of viewing the world, and to be curious about it. It doesn't weaken our values. Integrating into understanding actually deepens your humanity. It helps you see other people and go, okay, they have another way of viewing things. Now I want to get curious about that to try to understand. And that's where step 5, the third part that I wanted to emphasize, comes in, which is using solution imagination. And Domino is going to join us for that. She is. So, using solution imagination, once we understand each other's experiences, that's when we can start to create something together. So, it's taking the things that you're hearing and using that to ask the next question, to start to collaborate. It's not necessarily meaning that you're agreeing. Empathy is not about agreement. It's about connecting and understanding so that you can collaborate and compromise and build something together. And as it relates to our country, like that's what democracy was built to do, having parties come together to work together to resolve our differences. But you can't practice empathy from a distance. You have to get close. And this happens at work and in our personal life, whether it's about political topics or other things that are dividing us. You've got to come together in order to have the conversations and actually start to collaborate. So I've got 4 simple ways to start bridging the divide in your own life, and I've put those down in the notes section here so that you can reference them. But the first one is talk to people, not posts. The algorithm profits from your outrage. Real conversations do not. Have the actual conversation, talk to people in person or on the phone, pick up the phone and call, and have a real conversation, a real dialogue. Listen to what the other person is saying, share how you're feeling. The second simple way to bridge this divide is taking a curious breath and asking one more question. So, you know, those moments where you feel defensive or annoyed and you want to react to something, Instead, take a nice big deep inhale, stimulates the vagus nerve, which stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, turns it off so that you're not in fight or flight mode, and just ask, hey, please tell me more about that. Because that is the doorway that empathy walks through. Now, the third one is to spot your judgments. As I was talking earlier, you cannot change what you don't see. The more aware you are of your barriers, the freer you are to connect. So start to pay attention when your own biases, your past experiences, the stereotypes, the prejudice and stigma that you might be carrying, when those things are coming up, get curious about it and question it so that you can dismantle it. And then ultimately start small. Empathy scales from the inside out. It starts with possibly your family or friends where you've got a difference of opinion. Could be your classmates or your colleagues, your team at work. It can start in your community, a community organization that you're part of. By starting there in the smaller spaces, you can start to learn how to have more empathy and you can continue having those empathetic conversations, making those connections, building those bridges. That's how the big change happens. So, just to close out, empathy is not going to erase our differences, but it will remind us why those differences matter. They're what make our country alive. They're what make every organization alive. And it's about still debating and arguing and trying and reaching for understanding. And even now, that bridge between us is still there, even in this country. We are all still Americans. We live in America. We have that in common. That bridge is just kind of covered in weeds at this point. But working together, we can clear it together. Thank you for joining me, for being part of this conversation. If this has resonated, give it a like, subscribe, and please share it with somebody else that you know that maybe sees the world differently, because this is where the healing can start. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Rob Volpe, empathy activist, author of Tell Me More About That, and this has been Reading Between the Lines. I'll see you next time.